I've been drawing since I was a kid. I've always drawn people. I came from quite a large family. I've always drawn, I loved cartoons. I loved Hergé initially and Tintin. Over time, I realised that I wanted to do more and more art. I decided to go to art college, and I went to Wimbledon Art College to do foundation, and then I went to Cardiff Institute to do my degree. So I moved out of London. So that was back in 1991. So the work that I was doing was very traditional, in the sense that I was going out and painting buildings. I didn't know how to paint people at the time. I didn't know how to do what I do now, to stand in the street with a sketchbook and observe the theatre of the street, but not affect it, to kind of stand there and just sketch people. I did start doing some work about the fish markets in Cardiff and cafes and stuff, but I left art college and moved back to London. I had a studio in the squats for quite a while. It was a good time, but I didn't know what I was doing at all, and my work kind of fell apart and the squat shut down. So I was doing all kinds of odd jobs, and then I thought I needed a regular job, so I worked as a guard at the Natural History Museum for a couple of years. And I kind of made the move towards teaching. I got a job in a school in Peckham, and I taught in a secondary school for 4 years. I carried on working. I found a way to work. I found a way to draw the people that I was seeing in the streets. And since then, having connected up with my gallery back then, I had sort of back-to-back shows doing the paintings of Streetlife, really. And so this exhibition here is about 30 years of that idea of painting Streetlife.
Maybe outside of painting, who would you say has most inspired your work?
Music, I think. Musicians, the musicians that I listen to in the studio. I have music playing while I work. A lot of the energy and the rhythms from my work comes from the rhythm of that music and the stories of those songs as well. Other than that, it's people, really, the people that you meet and the stories that you hear, especially when I put on an exhibition in a public space. That's been my intention now for 15 years, to connect with people through my work. It's become sort of a reciprocal part of what I do, really.
Would you say there's any particular tool that's been important to you or stayed with you? Maybe something physical or just something that's kept you going?
I don't know. Just the determination to want to respond to the things that you're seeing. That's what keeps me going. In a city like London, we're blessed to live in a place that's got these layers of history to it. So it's about discovery. It's constant discovery. It's constantly reinventing itself, and that's what I'm interested in. Sort of uncovering that. So I'm understanding my city. As my relationship with it changes, as I've got older, as we now have children, so I'm seeing the world through their eyes as well, which is fascinating. So my relationship with the city is always changing. The city is always changing. So I guess, the thing would be that the city as a kind of muse, really. That's the thing that keeps me going.
What would you say is the worst critique, advice, or something that's hindered your work over time?
Oh, the worst advice. That's a good question. The thing that I feel very strongly about is about being true to what you do. Like when you hear artists sort of saying, you're not exactly churning your work out. I hear that word churning. And I think you don't need to add the word out. Maybe just stick with the word churning, because I'm churning all these emotions. I'm making work for myself. It's a kind of freedom that I have, really.
With that idea of freely churning out, not churning out, churning.
Churning.
Do you feel there's something in your work that people misinterpret or take the wrong idea from?
I think people don't understand the amount of work that goes into it. So the amount of sketches that go in to make one painting, the amount of time that goes into the work, the amount of versions of one painting that I'll make. To make one painting, I'll probably make 4. of the same scene, you know, over it could be 3 months, it could be, you know, 9 months. It's probably the longest I've spent on a painting.
With exception to this exhibit, obviously, what would you say is the last one that you've loved?
The last big exhibition that I saw that meant so much to me that I cried at was the Philip Guston show, which was at Tate Modern. I think, was it a couple of years ago maybe? But Philip Guston was a painter that I've loved so much since I saw his work, since I saw his early work, which is kind of social documentation in a way, like my work. You know, he's very influenced by Mexican muralists, some of the people that I'm influenced by. And then he kind of split from that sort of figurative way of painting and moved towards abstraction and, well, abstract art, and then he moved into abstraction. But I was particularly moved by the sort of late portraits of him and his wife, which I thought are just some of the most stunning paintings I've ever seen. And he's very influenced by early Renaissance painters that I love as well. So that would have been the show that's meant the most to me, I think, ever, probably.
So following from that, what would you say is an underrated gallery?
To be honest with you, I don't go to a huge amount of galleries. I tend to go back to the same place a lot. So I go back to the Soames Museum. I go back to the Hogarth pictures there. I mean, I tend to look at more, I suppose, painters from the past than contemporary painters. I don't feel very much connection to a lot of the art that I see, and I look for figurative art primarily because that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in stories and the stories of people. You know, I suppose, for want of a better word, real people. You know, people that you see in the streets, and I don't really see that reflected in painting. In fact, I haven't really seen that reflected really, apart from a painter called Jock McFadden, who I used to look at a lot, who's become a friend over the years. But when I was at art college, I was looking at Jock a lot.
Would you say, over the course of time, from your experience, has the art world changed, or the way your art's been perceived?
Hugely, yeah. I mean, when I was at art college, even before I went to art college, the idea that I would ever make a living as a painter just did not cross my mind at all, you know. And I was blessed to go to art college at a time where we didn't have to pay the fees. We got grants, you know. It was an amazing thing. And as a teacher of young people now who are fascinated by art, I'm just very afraid about the future, that people won't go to art college, people won't have the experiences that I had. And if that doesn't happen, and they have nowhere to work because they can't afford to work, then the city sort of becomes a vacuum. There's no kind of examination of what's happening in the city, what people are doing, you know, culturally. It becomes meaningless. The art world is always changing, but it kind of reflects the society that we live in, and we live in a culture that's very acquisitional and obsessed with money and celebrity, and so that's all become a part of it as well, and none of that interests me at all.
So then, more on the positive side, what would be a piece of advice you'd give to starting out artists today?
I think it's a hugely exciting journey to be making, you know. I think you don't really need a space to create art. I mean, obviously it helps, you know, if you can afford a studio, but you know, I was painting in my bedroom in a shared house, with 2-bedroom house with 5 other people, you know. I managed to get the biggest bedroom so I could make work, and my friends understood what I was trying to do. So you just have to keep making things. You have to keep being open. I mean, you don't even have to draw. You know, a lot of the time I'm just looking at people and I'm drawing them without actually having a physical pencil or pad to draw them in, you know. So just creating happens in all aspects of your life. But I think if you made the decision to go to art college, then I think it's a great thing to do. Really exciting.
Since you were little, it was sort of like an escape for you to do art and express yourself.
Yeah.
Has this always been sort of a direct pathway for you?
I think it is. I mean, I think when I was 10 years old, my father died, and that was obviously a very big thing in our family. And in some ways, you know, I've always felt a connection with my father and my mother now as well. She She died very suddenly a few years ago. So I think art has always been something that I've found a space for in my head. You know, I think you have obviously through grief you have a very intense response to. It's a great energy for me. It's a very creative force in my life, really. So, you know, you've got to do something with that energy, and you know, the pictures that I'm painting are stories of life, I suppose. So, you know, I'm taking that life and putting it into my work, and using that energy from that, and combining it with all the other things as well, the stories that I read and things that people tell me, and the music, you know, all of that.
How do you decide on a specific spot to paint in?
I think a lot of the time it can be the light in a particular place, or it could be the particular building. It could be a memory of something that I've seen that's happened there, so I'm going back to retrace that, to re-find that memory. It could be particular characters that I see in a place, like it could be one person that I've seen that I just thought, wow, there's something special about that person's energy, you know. I've got a list of like 30 different locations in the city that I want to make work about. And some of them are years old, so you go back to that place and it's changed completely and you don't feel the thing that you felt back then.
With the pace changing so quickly, is that a London thing, or have you had a different experience painting in different cities abroad?
I don't know those cities so well, so they're completely new to me when I go. Even when we were living in New York for 3 months, you know, you can never get to know the place properly. I felt more of a stranger there than I felt in other countries that I've been, even though I knew it really well. I thought I knew it really well through films and music I listened to. Because London's the place I understand the most. If you can ever understand a city, which I don't think you can, but you know, I understand particular parts of it, how they connect and how they work. And painting gives you such an insight into that as well, because you know, you're connected to lots of different people through the exhibitions that you put on, and through the people that you meet through your paintings as well. So all different walks of life, you know, so you have a kind of understanding of how the circles connect. And a part of the problem with painting in say Mexico or Bangkok, you know, or Tokyo, is that I don't understand the language. So, you know, I can't read the text that's written all around me. I can't understand the graffiti. I don't know the codes and the conventions of those places. You know, it's a bit like looking at Hogarth and the Georgian painters that I look at. You know, I've had to study, you know, I loved him when I was a boy, but I've had to study the Georgian codes to really kind of understand what those paintings are about. You can appreciate it on one level, you know, so I'm responding purely visually when I'm going to Mexico, when I'm going to Bangkok, when I'm in Tokyo, you know, it's a visual understanding of that place only.
Is there somewhere you would go back to?
I go back to all of them. You make a painting thinking, I'm painting about this, you know, I want to paint about this thing, and then everything completely changes throughout the course of making the painting, and you end up with something that you never expected to make, and you stand back and you finish it and you look at it and you think, who painted that? You know, I don't know who that person was,